Hello there, this is just a short video about Akhenaten, the famous pharaoh of the 18th dynasty, and of course this is in relation to my latest book. There you go, Scotia, Lost Sister of Tutankhamun. So a big part of the story and the reason why Meritaten or Scotia would have had reason to flee Egypt is because of her father, Akhenaten. So I thought it was interesting to take a look at him and explain what all the controversy is about. Akhenaten wasn't the oldest son of Amenhotep III. He was the second son, who should have been Pharaoh that died, his older brother. So he ended up becoming Amenhotep IV. His father had an interest in Artenism, the Arten, but it wasn't a sort of a singular thing. It wasn't his whole purpose or whole center of his religious life. He did have an interest in it, but it didn't take over. It wasn't something that was sort of an obsession, would be the word to use, an obsession. So at a certain point, we don't know exactly why or how this happened, he became completely obsessed with the Arten, which is the solar symbol. And there's various images of that in the book and on the internet that you can easily find. So what happened was he decided to change the structure of Egyptian religion almost overnight. He changed his name to Akhenaten. He moved his capital down south to what we call Amarna. He named the city Akhenaten. And this became the new religious and political center of Egypt. Of course, the existing order, which was based around Amun or Amun-Ra, had been there for centuries and centuries. Originally you had this cult of Ra, cult of Amun, which had been in two different parts of Egypt, and then the two kingdoms had joined together to make the Egyptian imperial power that we're familiar with. So these religious entities were sort of fused together. These gods, Amun-Ra, is what was the predominant cult. Of course, in reality, you had a great number of subcults and different deities. Isis and Osiris were very popular. Various others as well. Thoth, for instance. And so what happened was he decided to sort of eliminate all these other deities pretty much and institute worship of the Arten as almost the exclusive religious duty of Egyptians. But what he also did, what was quite revolutionary, was he stated that the blessings of the Arten were received through him alone and his family, which in itself was quite a radical departure from the previous order, in which the priesthood had an important role within Egyptian society. He more or less eliminated them in one action. So you can imagine this wasn't very popular. So all these changes to an existing structure had been there for hundreds of years were probably very not well received by particularly the priesthood of Amun, and possibly the actual public would have been very upset and disturbed by this. We don't actually know, but one can imagine that this wasn't particularly well received. Of course, the pharaoh Akhenaten had enormous power and ultimate authority, so it would have been very difficult for people to openly defy him. But then when you couple with this the displeasure that they were probably feeling about the Aten and Artenism, you couple that with the political and I suppose geopolitical or warring states kind of scenario. Egypt had allies, but also had enemies, particularly the Hittites. So it was a delicate balance in this part of the world, and Akhenaten's attention was very much taken away from international affairs. In the book, I mentioned some of the correspondence. There's a few extracts of ancient letters between different states, and complaints about Akhenaten's handling of international affairs. It would appear that he was so distracted with Artenism and creating his new city that he really mismanaged his empire and international affairs. So we don't really know exactly what happened to Akhenaten. Apart, we know that he died. We know that his first wife Nefertiti also died. His second wife Kia, his mother, obviously she was older anyway, but all during his reign. And Meritaten, the oldest sister. And he had 7, possibly 8 children. 6 of them were girls. And he had certainly Tutankhamun with his second wife Kia, and possibly Smenkhare is another son, although that's quite doubtful. We don't know about that for sure. We do know that Meritaten of Scotia did marry Smenkhare, who then died. So you have a tremendous number of deaths in the family, and there was a high mortality rate, but given these children seem to have mostly made it out of infancy, the mortality rate obviously it was a lot higher for infants than it was for adults. So one wonders if some of these deaths were suspicious. It's not actually recorded, so we don't know, but it seems to me a strong likelihood that some of them were suspicious, especially Tutankhamun. If his investigations of his mummy showed that his chest was crushed in, and he had a head injury and a leg injury as well. Some of it might have been previous. He may have had an accident, or he could have been involved in a sort of an episode where his chariot was sabotaged, causing him to crash, or he may have been attacked while in the chariot and then injured subsequently killed in that. Of course, there's no actual record of exactly what happened to him. We can only guess from the physical evidence, but he died very young. And he had married his sister, Akhenaten, although that's not her original name. She changed her name like Tutankhamun did to try and appease the priesthood of Amun-Ra. But to no avail. She was the only one that really outlasted everyone else. She managed to survive that marriage, married I II, who followed on from Tutankhamun. He was elderly anyway and died, and then she actually married Horemheb, the last of the dynasty. And then she did die herself without any offspring. And that led to the end of the dynasty, because Horemheb then named a new successor who became known as Ramesses III, who began the 19th dynasty. So the only one who appears to have left Egypt or got away from all this mess seems to be Meritaten. And she may or may not have been a devotee of the Aten. It certainly seems she was involved in the rites. She was elevated to the status of great royal wife to Akhenaten after the death of both his wives. And she was Queen of Egypt herself for a short time. And then all record of her vanishes. But what is very striking about Akhenaten is that he was almost erased from history. So much of the monuments around Egypt were destroyed or defaced. Much of the writings were erased. Of course, there are some intact statues, but most of them have come from the abandoned city of Amarna. Pardon me, Akhenaten. A lot of the city was smashed up, but obviously being rather a large place, they were unable to destroy all references to the Arten and Artenism, and all references to Akhenaten himself. So we do have some information about him, but the city itself was completely forgotten for close on to 3,000 years, buried in the sand. It was only pretty much discovered by accident. So he was lost to history for a very long time. And when they did find him, finally, the face mask on his sarcophagus had been ripped off, which is like the ultimate insult, really. And the belief was that if you had no face to your effigy, that you would not know your own identity in the afterlife. So it was not just an insult, but an actual attempt to spiritually sabotage him in the next world. So one can imagine there must have been a level of hatred amongst the officialdom and hierarchy of the time that must have been, equivalent to the vitriol people might have for someone like perhaps Hitler or Stalin or other leaders who were, vilified and hated for what they did. Not suggesting that Akhenaten massacred people. He seemed to be quite a peaceful and unwarlike leader. He didn't have any military campaigns, but his religious revolution, if you like, must have caused a huge amount of consternation and anger, and perhaps a level of hatred that possibly led to his death and many of the deaths in his family, and obviously led to the attempt to erase him from Egyptian history and the abandonment and destruction of his new capital. So that gives you some background about why Meritaten would have fled, given the whole situation with her father and her family surrounding Artenism and the unpopularity of this new religious cult. It would explain, at least to me, why she would have tried to escape Egypt. And the rest of the story about her going to Spain and to Scotland and Ireland, you'll find that in my book, which you can buy from my website, and you can also get it at Barnes & Noble and Amazon and various other outlets. So I hope that explains a bit of the story in why Akhenaten was such a controversial and until relatively recently a forgotten Pharaoh of Egypt. Okay, thanks for watching. I hope you found that interesting. Bye for now.